Another edition of Expanding Mind. I'm your host, Eric Davis, continuing our conversations about the cultures of consciousness. I need tell no one that video games, which is already a rather quaint term, computer games suddenly doesn't do it anymore. Games is not specific enough. It's almost like we don't have the right word for these growingly immersive, exciting, exuberant, addictive, fascinating, culturally rich, and increasingly even religious spaces that more and more people, millions and millions of people around the world, are spending more and more of their time interacting with, immersing themselves into with a widening number of devices, from the smartphone to the good old laptop, and of course to the exploding world of virtual reality and augmented reality games. So what is all this gaming doing to people's brains? What is it doing to our consciousness, to our sense of, dare I say, reality? These kinds of questions, which of course we talk about regularly here on Expanding Mind, are increasingly pressing. I myself am not a gamer. I know some gamers. I've known people who were addicted to games. I've played a bit myself, but I just don't really have the tendency. I think that I spend enough time in front of a screen. And I enjoy immersion in, I don't want to say the real world because that's sort of an ideologically loaded term, but I sort of enjoy sensory experience a lot. So when I'm not doing my writing, I prefer to kind of immerse myself in the outside. But I have come to respect the richness of the world of gaming, which is kind of an interesting thing it's kind of an interesting problem that if you're a gamer, then it's like your whole frame of reference in the discussion of games is very different than if you're not. It's easy for people who are not gamers to say, "Oh, look, they're not connected to the real world. They're losing all of these capacities to interact with people, et cetera, et cetera." But a lot of that just reflects one's own ignorance, because you don't realize the depth and richness and social possibilities and even consciousness exploration that goes on inside gaming. And on the flip side, people who are deeply into games, at least in my experience, often have a slight desire to sort of justify their sometimes excessive uses of time by extolling the positive features of games when obviously there's a shadow side. And so the issue goes on, and it's for that reason, because I'm not really a gamer, I do try to spend some time studying people who study gamers, or I also spend a lot of time looking over people's shoulders. Anytime I'm with people who play games, I'm like, let's go for a cruise, because I know I'm not going to be spending my personal time doing that. But I'm an anthropologist of the weird, and so I want to see these worlds that people are interacting with, and so that it becomes very important to pay attention to people who are studying games as well, because this is a way you can get a much better sense of what's going on inside people's minds, inside people's virtual worlds, than just sort of looking at it from the outside, where it can seem a little autistic. It can seem a little checked out. But of course, as someone who's interested in psychedelic drugs, I can't exactly fault people for wanting to move into a different dimension of reality and experience different kinds of sensations, different kinds of worlds, and to work with those experiences through the whole of their lives. And I believe that we can integrate these altered states and these fantastic experiences in positive and productive ways. But of course, there is a dark side as well. So I'm very happy today. I'll be speaking with Angelica Ortiz de Gortari, who's a psychologist and currently a postdoc fellow at the University of Liège. And she's, one of many psychologists and other sociologists and other folks who are studying game phenomenon. But she helped coin the term the game transfer phenomena, which describes that particularly uncanny, weird, and fascinating phenomena that many gamers experience of having elements of the game world appear, intrude, sometimes humorously, sometimes disturbingly, into the rest of their lives, into their real lives, to use, again, a sort of ideologically loaded term. And this is a fascinating phenomenon because it really just gives us it's sort of just the opening salvo of a whole engagement with the ways in which these devices, these experiences, these interactive encounters are going to be transforming our brains, our minds, our consciousness, our sense of reality itself, as more and more people dive deeper and deeper into more and more immersive games. So with no further ado, Angelica, thanks so much for joining me on Expanding Mind.
Yeah, thank you very much, Erik. Happy to talk to you.
That's great. So listen, I think I'd like to start out just sort of with a personal tip. Is that did your interest in studying gaming phenomenon as a psychologist begin with your own personal immersion and enjoyment of games? Were you a gamer before you started to study gamers?
Well, I have been really start to be interested to understand the effects of technology of internet. So this is how I started initially, my research about the effects of interactive technologies. And I play video games. I'm not a very hardcore gamer. I suddenly start playing games and then I stop playing, But these video games have been something that really interests me. And I have moved on from investigating and study the effects of the internet or excessive use or gaming addiction to actually understand particular video games effects. And I have focused on this in the last 6 years, more or less, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. Since you mentioned starting out talking about addiction or compulsive behavior, maybe we could just start out a little bit on that score. Do you think that the term addiction is appropriate to talk about what can happen to some people? I mean, I have a member of my extended family seems to be addicted, in terms of my terms, not being a psychologist, not being someone who works with addiction professionally. But do you think that is a good way of thinking about what can happen to people with compulsive gaming tendencies, or does it distort what's happening?
Well, I think the term of addiction is having generalized for many activities that we do in our modern life, right? So we need to be very careful about that. And there is a small number of population that can actually develop problems with gaming. And but we need to be very clear that when we're talking about addiction, you need to present a component, a series of symptoms for a particular period of time, and there need to be some dysfunction or distress in your life provoked by this activity. So there is many gamers that play intensively, but actually don't develop subsequent problems or actually lead to addiction. There is also, it can be occur for some period of time. People play a lot, and then after that, they don't play too much. So we need to be very careful when we refer to gaming addiction. But definitely there is, the study show it, there is a small number of population that actually have a serious problems with playing video games excessively and actually in a pathological way. And I started researching about internet addiction many years ago. But for me, it was very important to try to have a more broad approach, more neutral approach. And this is what took me to actually research about game transfer phenomena. Because I was between trying to decide, what a new path in my research I would take. And I was between actually these traditional areas of research, that is the video games addiction or violent video games. But I wanted to do something different, something, as I say, with more neutral approach. So I was interested to understand how the video game influenced gamers' perceptions of the world, the mood state, the fantasies. And I started, and this was it took me to, to start interview gamers about this experience. And in the end, I developed this against a phenomena.
Yeah, what's remarkable about it is just how widespread the mild form of the game transfer phenomena that you're talking about. I mean, I think you have 70-80% of gamers will experience at least a little bit of some of this kind of bleed over from one world to the other, which is kind of a remarkable number. And I guess it's been noticed for quite a long time, but nobody really kind of put the pieces together and really looked at it as a distinct phenomena. But so what are some of the more like common examples of things that a lot of gamers experience that fit under this category of game transfer phenomena?
Yeah, well, I think if you allow me, I think it's important to first establish what is game transfer phenomena, because I mean, game transfer phenomena is involuntary phenomena with video game contents. I mean, it's for example, when you listen to a song and you get the music or this song that you hate and you like a lot and you get it stuck in your mind. Or when suddenly you pay attention to some kind of bright image, and then suddenly you have some kind of after image. So probably you are familiar with this kind of experience. I mean, they happen to everyone. So this phenomena cover this large variety of experience in different sensory modalities, visual, auditory, body sensations, as well as a variety of thoughts. Sometimes we have thoughts that we cannot take away, that keep intruding in our activities, in our mind, popping up. We have also behavior. Sometimes we say something without intention, some slip of the tongue, So again, the phenomena, and what I have tried to do with my research is try to identify, to really operationally define about all these large variety of phenomena that happen in our everyday life, but with video game contents. So what we find in terms of phenomena, we have, as I say, cover a large variety of experience. For example, visual experience. We have gamers that have reported mind visualizations with video games. It's obvious that gamers, it's more easy to visualize images. So actually you see images with open eyes or closed eyes. We have, for example, gamers that see images with closed eyes. And this is quite interesting as well because sometimes gamers start seeing images from the game when they are trying to fall asleep. And this is usually known as hypnagogia images. And when you're in this hypnagogia state, this period between you are awake and you are falling to sleep. So some individuals report to see images from events or things that they have done during the day. So we see a lot of this with very repetitive and stereotypical video games. But the most interesting thing, and one the experience that there was initially, I did an interview with gamers. This is how it started against phenomena, so you understand really how this how they evolve. So in this study, that was like very small study, was 42 gamers that were interviewed, and when they start reporting that they have seen things, doing things without intention, with contents about the game. So in this particular, in terms of the visuals, there was a gamer that reported that he started seeing hell bars when he was playing a football game. So he said that he was losing the game, and then but suddenly they start scoring. So he described and he said, I start feeling the adrenaline pumping. And when this happened, I start seeing this kind of hell bars in the opposite team. So, and this experience repeat in these 42 gamers. Other gamers say, for example, that they see text boxes about the teachers during the class. And this was developed further in my other studies, that different studies as a part of my PhD. And these gamers start reporting that they have seen menus and when they are in conversations, or maps when they are searching for an address. And what is interesting here is that we see these associations between real activities and actually the activities in the game and these video game elements. So this kind of experience was actually the ones that motivated me to actually continue in deep to understand game transfer phenomena. Then we have also auditory experience. We go from gamers hearing music, voice, of sounds from the game, sometimes in their mind, like as I say, when you hear the music and you get stuck in your head. But actually, also, sometimes gamers hear sounds coming from objects associated from the video game. In the case of a game, a couple of
I was just going to ask a question about the sounds, because if you use, well, to speak about visuals first, you talked about some people have the experience of they're looking for an address and they'll see like a map, like a pull down menu feature. And obviously when that happens to the vast majority of people, they realize there's something kind of weird happening because it's a visual anomaly. So they recognize that there's something, they're hallucinating, or there's some sort of odd perceptual effect. But sounds are kind of weirder because if you hear an explosion or the sound of guns or something, you don't really know. And I'm wondering, like, whether there are certain sensory modalities where people are more likely to be confused, to actually think that they're hearing the sounds from the outside world and not just coming from a bleed over from the game.
Yeah, well, this is very interesting, and you are, 100% right. I mean, sounds, it seems to be, I think it depends a lot about the content about the game, but sounds, definitely, especially when they are associated with aversive contents about the game, like a bullet, explosion, the gamers respond to this because, of course, they expect that something as in the real world will happen as in the game. For example, there is a example. There is a case of a gamer that he said that sometimes when he walks in the darkness, he hears the sounds the radio makes, indicating a monster is close by. And suddenly he hears the sound. That is a quite descriptive sound, It doesn't need to be very pitchy. It just sounds that are very repetitive and important in the game. And then he hears it, and suddenly he starts looking around, expecting and looking for this monster. And in this case, this gamer, it seems in some cases there are some changes of behavior. This gamer says that he have a flashlight under his close to his bed, just in case. So yeah, and it's that they have a gamer reported. I mean, I would say it depends about the contents about the game. It's very important how gamers interpreted this experience and as well the circumstances where this experience occurred. But it seems that sounds you cannot really map it. I mean, you hear it, and then the things are more distress. At least in the studies, they have reported more distress with auditory experience. So yeah.
So how do people react? What is the range of how people react to these experiences? Some people, probably some people are going to actually believe them, and then most people don't. But do they think they're funny? Is it disturbing that they realize that the intensity of their gameplay is maybe actually bleeding into their actual lives? Is it just kind of annoying? You mentioned the earworm, when you get a song stuck in your head and you're like, whatever, who cares? It doesn't matter. It's just annoying. So what is the range of people's experiences when they realize that this is happening to them?
Yeah, well, we have incredibly, there is more gamers have reported the phenomena, something pleasurable down pleasurable. So we have some percentage of distress. For example, when you look at these people that have experienced GTP at some point in their life, we have some 20% that have experienced at some point some distress or dysfunction. Then when you go to see these people that have experienced Gender phenomena, many types of Gender phenomena, and very frequently, then you find a 58% that have experienced distress or dysfunction. But in general, it seems that Gender phenomena, gamers like it in the most of the cases, or they are indifferent to it. But it depends about the experience. For example, a very simple experience, for example, like seeing images or recurrent images when you are trying to fall asleep, or hearing sounds constantly, they have reported as a very uncomfortable, because sometimes gamers have this sleep deprivation. They cannot fall asleep because they can hear in the music, but they see in the images. Every time they close their eyes, they see the images. And we have also other cases where it depends on the circumstances. So sometimes gamers find themselves performing some action as in the game start dancing as in the video game character, or found themselves falling images in the highway. And and sometimes gamers get actually get concerned about how the automatic responses, and yeah, certainly they actually reflect about how long they have been playing, or what are actually the effects of the video games in their everyday life. So it's a very wide variety of appraisal, a lot variety of interpretation about the experience, but it still depends a lot about the content about the video games, how frequent are experienced game-driven phenomena, and actually how gamers interpret this experience. It seems that also it's very, some gamers really like it, some gamers actually try to induce the experience, and sometimes for gamers, experience game-driven phenomena is a means to be like a gamer, part of the gaming community, be a hardcore gamer. So I think it depends about the experience and the gamer. But in general,
one example you had in one of your articles that really struck me, and I can't remember the game, but the effect in the game when you were doing something, the frame rate would slow down, like the actual the event would slow down, and so you would be able to do more things in a period of time, and that he noticed that effect happening for a few days in his ordinary life, where everything would slow down. It was like the frame rate of reality was slowing down, and he said it was awesome, and it is really fascinating. I mean, it's amazing that the something like the frame rate of experience itself can be malleable. I mean, we know that for example, when people get into accidents, oftentimes their memory of the event, at least, or their experience at the time, is kind of hard to say which, is that time slows down. I've had that experience when I had an ATV accident when I was a kid, and so it's like that capacity to slow down, let's say, the frame rate of real experience is clearly something that is malleable to some degree inside of us without any intervention from a game. But in that sense, you can look at games as like learning environments to be able to develop control, or at least to begin to hack, if you will, the sort of usually unavailable substratum of how we build our sense of ongoing reality. So it must actually be very exciting for some people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems that this virtual immersion and this automatic association that I established between objects that have been simulated in the game can open different channels and different possibilities. But we don't know yet actually which are these individuals actually, I mean, in which extent actually they are able to actually control their experience. But we have also gamers that have reported to control their images, or when they are trying to fall asleep, and control the move with their hands, or kind of start actually replaying the full game session. But I mean, it's very difficult to know what extent actually is an interpretation about this, or actually gamers are able to do it. But I mean, video games is a sensorial experience, right? It's activation of all of our senses and high cognitive loads, and we need to respond, we need to use our resonate and take decisions. So it is really an interplay of all these sensory channels and our cognitions, and it's no strange that actually, this is facilitating certain experiences that are considered like anomalous or, not so common, and they are happening now in gamers' lives.
Yeah, all over the place. One of the more kind of odd things, like some of this, when I read the details of people's experience, this wide range of types of experiences or the phenomena. One was that sometimes people have like involuntary physical movements. Their hands would be raising, and because they've been doing a certain gesture in the game, or they're walking around a corner and they just spontaneously start to get crouched like they were doing in the first-person shooter, and they're not choosing to do it. It's just happening automatically in their bodies. How should we think about that? How do you think about the physical, the non-willed, spontaneous physical movements that that are sometimes stimulated by gameplay?
Yeah, well, it seems that the virtual embodiment is very important, particularly for this experience. So we have this manifest in different ways. We go from gamers, feeling involuntary movements of fingers or legs. This seems to be explained by the repetitive movements of control of the gamepad. And we have actually, but one of the most interesting things is when actually gamers experience these involuntary movements of arms triggered by objects in real life. I mean, this is a case of gamers that a couple of gamers report that they are playing a game where they need to use a bionic arm and to honk under some bridge or different things. And this is a case of a gamer that he say that when he saw a bridge and he saw that he couldn't actually honk under the bridge, he felt the involuntary movement of his arm. So we see this importance, and one of we have been not investigated yet, but one of my, I believe that my theories is that actually objects that have been associated with activities in the game or with some sound or some image are actually activating areas of the brain, and this is why gamers are actually experiencing some movement, seeing some image, or hearing some sound. Or would it be the case that actually gamers are misattributing their own thoughts and actually are perceiving this kind of tactile, involuntary tactile sensations or hallucinations, that movement or seeing or hearing things. So it's like two different possibilities. But these involuntary moments.
Can I interrupt there? I just want to clarify that those two different ways of thinking about this phenomenon. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. In the one model, it's that actual things in the actual world are serving as triggers because there's similar objects in the game world, and so whatever. I don't have a good example, but every time there's a barrel in Donkey Kong that has bananas in it, and so I'm doing that all the time in the game, and then I go out in the world and I see a barrel, and I'm going to go, oh yeah, it's associated with an action of like opening it up and getting bananas out of it. And that's one kind of model. And then the other model is just that it's just sort of happening spontaneously. It's not necessarily triggered by events in the actual environment. It's more just sort of a cognitive loop or projection that's happening kind of erratically. Am I getting that distinction right?
No, exactly. So one is that the association in both cases is very important. I mean, three objects that have been simulated in the game, it seems to be very important for many of the games of the phenomenon experience, at least the one that happen in everyday life. And but what I'm trying to say is that objects that have been associated with the game, with action, for example, are activating areas of the brain associated with motor activations. So this is why gamers are actually moving their arm or experiencing that they're moving their arm, or objects are associated with images or sounds. So they are activating areas of the brain associated with visualization, with images, with sound. And the other possibility is that gamers are just misattributing errors. They are misinterpreting, these sensations. Their thoughts are being transformed in sensations and perceptions, but actually are just thoughts that are misattributed, misinterpreted. But, this is something that needs to be investigated further. But this is what we could explain, actually, that gamers are experiencing these involuntary movements of fingers or arms, because it's different, right? When you watch a movie, you see movement, but you are not actually embody these characters, and you are not repetitively doing these activities. I mean, we see this, for example, thoughts and behaviors in GTP are highly associated. Seems to be very associated with repetitive activities, jumping in the game, different activities. repetitive activities that are performed in the game are actually the ones that sometimes manifest in real-life context.
So one question I had is that, there's a wide variety of, kinds of games, first-person shooters, massive multiplayer role-playing games, Twitch games like Candy Crush or Tetris or whatever. Does the game transfer phenomenon show up more often with certain genres of game, like when there's a more developed narrative avatar, or when there's more repetitive action? Is there a way you can find what are the elements in specific games that are more likely to lead to this phenomena?
Well, I have not investigated particular video games, but we have certain experiences are more likely to occur with certain games, like, for example, seeing images with closed eyes. They are more associated with video games that are very repetitive, very stereotypical, like a Candy Crush, Tetris, games this type. And we see like thoughts and behaviors are more associated with more realistic video games, because games are doing activities in the video game. And I have recently conducted some study with Pokemon Go that probably you are familiar with. So are you familiar with Pokemon Go?
Yes.
Yeah. So in this game, we see, for example, we have also very large percentage of game transfer phenomena. I mean, almost all the people have experienced GTP at some point in their life. But we see, for example, lower percentage of experiencing, like hearing something from the video game, because many people don't play the game with the sound. Or we see, for example, lower percentage of for example, one of the largest percentage in terms of body experience in general in video games. In two different studies with over 1,000 gamers, we found out that body sensation of movement is highly prevalent. So feeling the gamers, sometimes they're falling asleep and they start feeling the movement from the game. This is a neural adaptations, like when you are in a boat and you after that be all the day in the boat or traveling in a train, you keep feeling the movement. So it's similar to this. So we see in games like a Pokemon, if they don't have this characteristic, we don't see this experience. So, so it's very interesting to see that actually depends about the structural characteristics and the characteristics of the game are actually, obviously, what we are now seeing it, at least compared with this Pokemon Go, that there are differences. So there is important, but I have, unfortunately, no conduct particularly, comparison between the video games experience, but it seems thoughts and behaviors are very related to video games that are very realistic, that are, highly, it's very easy to associate the things that you do in the game, objects, and also this realism seems to be very important for game transfer phenomena. I mean, gamers confusing the memories from the video game with those in the real world, found themselves going to buy something and then realize that why I'm buying this? What I need, but I come here, I need it was something that I need from the game. Thinking about people and suddenly realize that they're actually video game characters. So these kind of games, facilitate this kind of experience.
You've mentioned going to the hypnagogic state a number of times. The fact that one of the places that people see this kind of phenomenon most readily is while going to sleep, in that kind of twilight zone between waking world and deep sleep. And that's a very interesting state of consciousness. There's a lot of weird phenomena associated with it. People sometimes have paranormal experiences. Me personally, that's often been the most weird natural states of consciousness that I've gotten into. I've had very powerful experiences in that zone. But it makes me think that there's a way to understand games, to think not so much necessarily about addiction or violence or how, or on those kind of topics, but more to think about them almost as a way of engaging altered states of consciousness, that our minds, our brains have these capacities for this wide range of states of consciousness, and that games are kind of like moving into that realm. I mean, there's elements of trance, there's elements of absorption, there's elements of dissociation, there's elements of hypnagogia, of dream. All of these different kind of aspects of consciousness seem to be implicated in game phenomena. Is that something that more and more people are looking at who are studying games, looking at less at maybe social factors or and more about states of consciousness?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid that the research just has focused more on actually, addiction or violent video games. There is some area of research about dreams, but there is not so much interest so far. Have you not explored so much? It's still a very small niche of research, but I think it's fascinating. The way that we can, video games are really it's a choreography all over senses, and how this can be explored and explored in many different ways. So definitely, we have gamers having this kind of synesthesia experience, simulation, synthetic, you can call it synesthesia experience. Hearing sounds, seeing things, all these sensations. And it's fascinating the things that we can understand about the brain choreography through understanding a gamer's experience. So it's a lot of possibilities, but unfortunately, so far it has not been too much research in this area. But hopefully, it starts expanding little by little. And I think one of the most interesting things in research about game phenomena is that actually you can identify what in the video game is actually trigger or facilitating this experience in the most of the cases. And this is fascinating because you can do all kind of studies and you can really, induce kind of trance states just by playing video games.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about how, as a psychologist, you think about trance when looking at video games? There's these sort of overlapping categories. We talk about trance, we'll talk about dissociation, about absorption, and of course there's healthy, what we would think of as normative or healthy forms, when you're reading a book and it's so fascinating you don't hear the phone ring or something, and you're like, no one's going to say that's pathological. But at the same time, very similar kinds of states of absorption can be seen or interpreted as being pathological, or dissociation particularly. Suddenly you're not identifying with your ordinary personality or your sense of reality, or you have derealization. Suddenly the world seems like a false simulation or something, and obviously that's not that's not an experience everybody wants to have necessarily. So when you're looking at this issue of trance or dissociation that is part of the deep gaming experience, how do you think about it? How do you differentiate the different elements of these trance states or absorption states?
Well, here we are talking about some normative dissociative phenomena, right? It's not pathological, as you say. And we see it in entertainment media. We see, for example, in video games, it's very common, and even when we watch some movie, there is a time distortion, this kind of loss of track of time, and this absorption, this immersion in the world. But what is different with certain video games that are able to make us feel present in the virtual world, and really to embody these characters, or to perform these activities. And it seems that this is an important element in terms of game transfer phenomena. So we see, these kind of trance states are very important, and when gamers really engage in doing these activities, so being transported in this virtual world, and so this is something very powerful, and it will become even more important with the highly immersive technologies like a VR. So there is it's very, very interesting to understand this kind of trance states. And the game getting the flow, lost, as I said, lost the track of time, lost the feel really in the virtual world. And some gamers have reported to feel actually that they are still in the game after stop playing. Sometimes suddenly after stop playing, they found themselves that they are still really in the game, or sometimes a stimulus, hearing a sound, seeing an object, actually trigger this kind of memory. But it's not just a memory. It's actually feel that they are in the virtual world, like this realization-like experience. Sometimes they feel actually they are the video game characters, like this personalization-like experience. So we see this phenomena. And one of the most interesting things of game transfer phenomena is that when gamers have system objects that have been simulated in the game, it's not sometimes it's just thought, but not all the time. Sometimes they really lead to these kind of short moments of dissociations. I mean, sometimes gamers found themselves performing something that's in the game, and then they realize that they are actually not in the game. There are gamers that have suddenly see a tree and then found themselves walking toward the tree to actually pick up this plant or hit it or whatever, and then suddenly they realize that they are actually not in the video game. In my first study with this interviews that I conduct, I mean, it's a gamer that said that he saw a bicycle and he walked all the way toward the bicycle, and suddenly, because he was thinking to take the bicycle, and suddenly he realized he was not in the game. So we see these very short episodes of dissociation that, gamers are learning to respond to certain stimulus in the way that they do it in the game, because they are very repetitive. They do very repetitive activities. Video games is a sequence of actions, and every action has some consequence, right? But then when the gamers see these objects, sometimes it's just a thought. Sometimes they have this kind of whoosh that they want to do something that's in the video game. Sometimes they actually do these kind of actions that they realize that they cannot do it, and then they stop before they do the action, or they actually perform the action when it's something usually no harmless. So we see this transfer of this kind of these very short moments of dissociations in everyday life with video game content.
What's fascinating about this is that it resembles some of the work people do intentionally in order to develop lucid dreaming, but even deeper, there's a number of Tibetan Buddhist practices of dream yoga that precisely attempt to undermine the sense that the real world is the way it seems to be by introducing dream elements into that world. Like from the Tibetan Buddhist perspective, our ordinary sense of reality is an illusion, but we're attached to it, and so you need to kind of undermine that attachment. And one of the ways to do that is to blur the boundaries between dreaming and being in the real world. So you bring things over from one world to the other. And it's so funny because it's just in such a different category, these ancient religious practices of consciousness transformation. And here we are, with entertainment technologies, stumbling into the same capacity that we have to erode, but start to bleed these different domains into one another. And it's a remarkable opportunity, but of course it's disturbing and alarming as well, depending on how it shows up, which kind of leads to the general question, the inevitable question in these kind of interviews. There's some people who see all this and they go, "Oh my God, we're like losing touch with reality. People are going to be checking out of our our difficult world and just immersing themselves in this. And look, they're not even able to stay in the ordinary world." I take it you have a more positive view of it. I'm kind of curious if you could speculate a little bit about, given that different types of games can induce different kinds of game transfer phenomena, can shift the boundaries of the game world and the real world in different ways. Can you imagine ways that this can be kind of harnessed in interesting or other ways in the future, with developing certain kinds of games in order to produce certain sorts of bleed over effects that might be of interest psychologically in terms of practical results? Do you have any kind of interesting speculations about where we might go with this?
Well, I think that we have this currently, maybe not in video games, more in virtual reality. I mean, that have used, for example, for therapies. I mean, sensations of phantom limbs, with the sensations of virtual limbs. I mean, there's a lot of possibility of applications, actually, of this kind of this embodiment in the virtual world and these kind of dissociative states. I mean, even to understand actually by themselves what is dissociative states and in relation to medical conditions. I think, where are we going? I think video games every day are becoming more immersive and more realistic, and as video games become more realistic and more immersive, but stimulate a large variety of sensory channels, we'll be able to feel more present in the virtual world. And the contents about the video games, it will be important, but not just this. What the individual will do with these contents about the game, it will be important in the long run, right? I mean, you have the soul, you have the sensations, but how you what you do with this? And I think this is why it's important to be aware about these things. I think there is a lot of possibilities because you can enhance this kind of trance state. Of course, we also need to be aware that not everybody has this experience. Probably we are talking about susceptible individuals that have very vivid imagination, that are prone to probably to get in trance state, hypnotic states. That are the ones that are more susceptible to this kind of experience. And we see it actually. We have investigated some elements in the game or motivation for playing, and we see that, for example, gamers that play the game and get very immersed, gamers that play the game for exploring and for escape or reality are those that have more likely to experience game phenomena. While those that play the game for socialization purposes, they are actually not relevant for game traffic phenomena. So we are talking about particular individuals that are more likely to this kind of experience, as they enjoy this experience or are more susceptible to maybe feel present in the virtual world. But we are really in the initial phase about to understand game traffic phenomena because it has been not investigated from this perspective academically before. So we need to, I think it's a lot of potential for understand many different involuntary phenomena, and this is what usually when you investigate involuntary phenomena, as I refer to like hallucination, dissociation, illusions, intrusive thoughts, all have been investigated in a different, related to the different areas of research. And what game phenomena is doing is integrating all these modalities to understand a phenomena, and it's very challenging because it's a lot of variety. We have this interplay that is very complex of the brain, cognitions, perceptions, and behavior. But it seems that, it's leading us to understand more and more about how we actually can experience these short moments of dissociation in the real world. And in most of the cases, it seems that for gamers have not had any further implications, but for certain individuals, in certain circumstances, can pose some kind of risk of put them in some compromised situation.
Yes, in that sense, it's just like so many things, in the world, that there's a certain percentage of people that respond to them in disturbing or pathological ways, while most people manage that to not go that direction. And that's always a question about how to go forward. But I'm really fascinated by the idea that studying these kind of psychological phenomena associated with gaming allows us to build a more multidimensional way of understanding how we move, how the brain constructs reality, how we operate, because it forces you need to integrate all of these different elements, including spiritual and sort of altered states issues. That's what seems interesting to me, is that even in a very even if you're like very much just interested in real world effect, or you're approaching it as a sociologist, you have to start looking at some of these altered states things that look like out of body experiences or ways that dreams are transforming. There was one article that you linked to from your site where you have a very nice collection of articles on this related to this topic that showed some linkage between people who were doing virtual reality games and their incidence of lucid dreaming. The implication being that somehow being inside of a virtual reality world tended to increase one's ability to control the dream world, which in some sense is kind of like our internal virtual reality engine that we don't usually control. And that's very, very significant, very fascinating. I mean, obviously we need to do more research before we know how robust that is. But it does seem like there are ways in which these games are allowing us to actually explore the worlds of altered states, of trance, of dissociation, of hypnagogia, of the dream world, of quote-unquote paranormal experiences, and to sort of play with that edge through gaming, not necessarily intentionally, but it's almost like we can't avoid those aspects of human consciousness because they're appearing in ordinary people's lives kind of unexpectedly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is very, very interesting. A lot of possibilities really to explore really this, and in a very economical ways, I would say. I mean, video games, playing video games and understand also how you can control your dreams. And I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, because you control everything in the video game, right? I mean, we see ourselves as we don't, our avatar, as we don't perceive ourselves in the real world. So have a lot of video games have a lot of very interesting elements, to understand all these phenomena that we still don't understand.
So what do you see ahead for what's your next stage of research? What are you looking at next?
Well, now I'm interested to do experiments. We need to do experiments, to understand more about game transfer phenomena. I mean, I'm really very interested to understand this interplay between cognition, perceptions, and behaviors, how this kind of phenomena is helping us to understand this phenomena. I mean, it's not just understand video games effects, what are the effects of video games. It's not actually how the research that I have conducted of game phenomena, how this can help us to understand, how the mind works, how we this interplay between these different sensory perceptions. But it's a lot of possibilities, I mean, that I'm currently trying to explore. And I also will explore some VR technologies. I believe that the game phenomena will be more predominant with VR. So I wanted to test, gamers that play VR, gamers that doesn't play VR, and see actually what we get from this. So it's a lot of possibilities. But I wanted to do some experiments.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can only imagine that some gamers are really appreciative when they find out about your work, because they might, think, wow, this is just happening to me. Maybe I'm going crazy, or maybe my brain is broken. And indeed, on your website, you have this pretty cute series of cartoons where you kind of show all the different types of phenomena that can happen, and it's an amazing how the range of this phenomenon. It's not just like a couple of things. It's like there's many, many, many different types of experiences that people have, and you write that you're trying to kind of demystify the phenomenon. And I can only imagine that a lot of gamers are really appreciative of it, because it's like, wow, this is something you get to deal with. It's not just my own, individual experience.
Yeah, well, in fact, this has been the more rewarding thing that I get after all this hard work of research, is that actually gamers thank me for actually know that this phenomena exists, that they are not the only ones, and actually don't interpret it as a sign of mental illness or pathology, and that this is some of the challenge that we have, that when someone starts seeing things or hearing things, it's very easy to lead into conclusions and say, like, okay, it's getting it's mental ill, or all these kind of negative connotations that it have, but no necessarily. And gamers have really thanked me for this, and it has been very positive. But I mean, not all the time. Some gamers get upset about this, but in the most of the cases, gamers recognize the experience and they like against the phenomena because instead of to be called like I'm an addict or I'm crazy, I'm a psychotic, I just have experienced against the phenomena. And yes, it happened to me. And in the most of the cases, when I talk to gamers in conference, or when they contact me, they recognize the experience. They say, this has happened to me. And, no further consequences. So, yeah, I started thinking that I was getting crazy, and now I know that this have an explanation. In fact, we wanted to use Gender's phenomena to help individuals with schizophrenia to understand the variety of experience that they have. And, some kind of psychoeducative way to understand the variety of altered sensory perceptions that sometimes we think that is just associated with pathology, but the Gender phenomena have demonstrated that is not the case. And the tendencies in research about in hallucinations, it goes toward this, to understand hallucinations and delusions like in a population that are not clinical, because they are more common among the general population than we think. But of course, I mean, this population don't have this negative connotation, right? So it's important to make the difference. I mean, gamers will say, in the most of the cases, experience GTP as something pleasurable, and they don't have further consequences. But,
I think that
it depends.
Yeah, it seems like it's really part of a larger shift that's happening, again, as we recognize that more and more of these altered states or peculiar factors of consciousness are just more widespread among the non-clinical population than we normally thought. I mean, hearing voices is another great example that used to be the sign of total madness, and now when you actually do research, you realize that there's all sorts of ways that people hear voices in different ways and manage that experience. And this seems to be part of that larger process that goes beyond gaming. But actually, we're gonna have to wind it up there. I see where we have very little time left. So, Angelica, thanks so much for joining us on Expanding Mind.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay, well, good luck. For those of you listening, keep your minds open.